Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello and welcome to the latest episode. It is Friday again, the 30th of January 2026, and I hope you've had a good week. I have to say my week has not got a whole lot better, actually. I know I was a little bit grumpy on Tuesday and I thought this is not going to be my week, and it has turned out really not to be my week. So I'm going to talk in a second about a subject that I get very, very excited about in an attempt to ensure that this podcast is not just me being very grumpy. So on Wednesday, I went to see Hamnet in the cinema, and I have to say it's one of the top 50 films I've ever seen in my life. It's absolutely excellent, beautifully shot, and it's beautifully acted, and it's incredibly emotional. So I do recommend you go and see it, but definitely take tissues with you. Now, I have been quite inspired by everybody's Instagram this week of what they're up to. I have kind of realized that I've got a little bit stuck on making reels, mostly me complaining about the rain. So I need to stop doing those. And I have spent all week being super grumpy. And I think one of the reasons why this week, not just like not being able to put my car window down and a third of my tulips getting eaten, it's because I've been doing other jobs this week. So I'm kind of back to doing other bits and pieces. Growing flowers is not my full time job, unfortunately. It will be one day, but not yet. And so I do little bits of other work to pay the bills. And I deeply resent it. So I have got to this point where I do not want to be anywhere than on the field. Now, before I started doing my year one growing, I decided to finish all of my other jobs and just focus entirely on growing cut flowers. And didn't make anywhere near enough money to survive. So I had a really squiffy period when I had about £1 in my pocket. And so I've had to go back out and do some jobs to pay the bills. And I have got to that point now where I'm so deeply resentful of it. It's awful. I mean, on the one hand, I don't get so het up about things anymore. I just go to work, do what I get paid to do, come home and moan about it, but I don't get involved in any of the, getting overly stressed about things or getting upset about how things are done, because I see lots of practices that I don't necessarily think are the right way to do things. But it's not my place to say anything anymore. I, need to be focusing on my own business. But the lure of my field is just absolutely magnetic, and I hate leaving. And so I'm often quite late for jobs now because I just do not want to go. So I have to make this year successful so that I can be on the field more, not less. And everybody's Instagram seems to be like bed prepping or sowing seeds. And as much as I love doing it, it's driven me absolutely bonkers this week because I just think I want to be on my field doing all of this, not doing other stuff. So, got to make this year count. So, when I was thinking about what to talk about this evening, I thought, what subject is going to make me really, really happy to talk about that might be interesting for you? I don't want anyone to get depressed listening to me. So, what is my favorite subject to talk about? Well, one of them is compost, and I could talk about compost all day long to anybody that listens. I absolutely love compost. I love making it, even though I don't actually do it. It just happens. But I still think it's one of the most magical processes that you can have. And in the second part of this episode, we're going to carry on with the plant profile series. And tonight I'm talking about Echinacea purpurea and why I think it's such a fantastic cut flower. So back to the compost. I have seen people on their Instagram this week making their new beds with cardboard down on top of turf and then lots of compost over the top. And you do need quite a bit of compost to do that. Now, back in the day, well, 10 years ago maybe, you could get 3 bags of compost for £10. and the compost wasn't bad quality. It was nothing exceptional, but you could get 3 bags for 10, and you could make a good start with that. And they were sort of 70, yeah, 70-litre bags, I think, something like that. Decent sized bags anyway. I tell you, the price of compost today is absolutely wild. And one of my favorite brands to use is Melcourt Silvergrow. They do a really, really exceptional compost. I love it. It's a mixture of fine bark, wood fiber, and coir. And it really is just the most gorgeous, gorgeous product. I have never found anything bad, like plastic or rubbish, excuse me, in a bag of Silvergrow. But the pricing on it, I mean, quite rightly, it's a fantastic product, but the pricing is, I think it's pretty wild. So if you're just going to buy a bag, it's somewhere between, I don't know, 12 and £15. If you buy half a pallet's worth, you can get it for about £7 a bag. But I mean, that's half a pallet's worth. And the bags are only 40 litres in size anyway. Now, I'm not knocking the product at all, because it is, exceptional quality. But that is a lot of money to spend on compost, which used to just be super cheap. And it's important because you need quite a lot of compost. So you either make it yourself or you have to buy it. And I think making it yourself is always the best option, because it saves you an absolute ton of money, but also because the bacteria and the fungi that are going to be inside your homemade compost are going to be perfectly tailored to your soil. It's like the perfect match. And I think some composts, in fact, not maybe all composts, are actually heat treated or sterilized in some way before they get to us. So a lot of what I would consider like the high value part of it, which is the bacteria and the fungi, are no longer there because they've been destroyed. Whereas when you use your own compost, you've got a whole world of ecology living inside it. And I would encourage anybody listening to start making their own compost as soon as they possibly can. You honestly won't regret it. And there are lots of different ways you can do it, but by far the easiest, I think, is with pallets. Now, I have touched on this on one of my episodes last year when I went through a phase of manifesting pallets, and then I started with one, and then I've ended up with about 20. And what it's done is people often want to just get rid of pallets, and you often see them just on the side of the road or by people's houses where they've had, bathroom tiles or something delivered, and sacks of cement or something. And often, tradespeople just get sick and tired of pallets. They're constantly having to deal with them. So you can always get hold of pallets. And I made mine really, really simply, just literally screwing them together. And if you get hold of how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7 pallets, you can make yourself 3 compost bays. And you may want pallets to go at the front to have like doors. I've got like pallets as doors on the front of mine, but the doors are just cable tied on. And you literally just screw them together, put them straight on the ground, not on concrete or any other kind of material, because you want whatever's in the soil to come up through the bottom of the compost heap. And I also have 3 that are just for leaf mold as well. So I'm really into making a leaf mold. I absolutely love it. It's brilliant. And I collect a lot of leaves from a fantastic mature black mulberry tree, and they are just absolutely gorgeous. So if you can get started on it, have a leaf mold bay and then have a compost bay as well. Now, there's all sorts of information about what to add and how to add it for compost. And it can get really, really complicated. And it can seem, if you're new to it, like just like an absolute mission to do it. And I have to say that I have studied it as part of a course I did when I did my RHS course years ago. I did learn all the proper ways you're supposed to do it, but it boils down to green material and brown material. And it really is as simple as that. And you want a mixture of the two. Now, I don't get involved in the whole putting shavings on or putting newspaper in or doing anything like that. I literally stick to green material and brown material. And if I've got too much of one thing, I'll put it somewhere by the compost bays until I can balance it out with the other material. So you're constantly putting different layers of green and brown on. And I also don't put grass clippings in mine because I just hate that whole swampy, stinky mess that you end up with. And I also do not add anything that's food related. Now, I know this is a controversial one, and some people put all sorts of stuff in their compost bays. But given that I don't know that I have a serious rat problem anymore. There are rats on my field, obviously. It's in the countryside. There are rats there, and there's mice. The squirrels haven't come back, actually. I think the next door neighbours they've poisoned everything, basically. But I think the squirrels have vanished. I haven't had squirrels for ages. But I wouldn't want to encourage the rats or the mice any more than they're already encouraged by the fact that there are chickens up on the field already. So for me, definitely no tea bags, no banana skins, no leftovers, absolutely no food stuff. It is literally all plant material. So what the rats do with my compost bays is they just use them as accommodation. So they're not eating anything, although obviously they ate my tulip bulbs, but there's nothing for them to eat in the compost base. So they've just made a sort of apartment complex in there, which every so often gets disturbed when I take the compost out. But what the rats have been very helpful for doing is that when they're in the process of making this fantastic duplex apartment, they turf out the compost that they don't want out of the sides of the pallets. So I can tell how active they are and what they're up to by the size of all the compost that they have turfed out. And they're turfing out beautiful, beautiful compost as well. So I can also gauge how ready my compost is by what the rats are up to. So they do have their good sides. But I would say don't get too worried about like doing this sort of precise recipe for compost. The main thing is to just get started and keep going with it and learn as you go along. Now, I also don't put twigs or branches or sticks or anything like that, anything that is wider than, well, maybe even half a bamboo cane's worth of width, because I know that what happens at the end is I will just have to ferret the bits out myself. So I'd rather just not put them in the first place. And some people say you're supposed to chop everything up as finely and small as you can before you put it in. I think this depends very much on the scale that you're working at and how much time you've got. So if you had a lawnmower, some people put everything on the ground and then they just lawnmower over it. Well, I'm not going to be doing that. And I'm also not going to stand there chopping material up. So it all goes in and it all ends up as beautiful compost a year later. So I guess if you've got the time and you've got the space and the energy, you could chop it into smaller pieces if you wanted to. I find that it breaks down perfectly well by itself. Now, to turn or not to turn, that is the question. I do not turn mine, except in rare occasions when I actually suddenly realize I need some compost for something and I don't want to go and buy it. And then I will lift off what's on the top of my heap and get out the compost from the bottom and then put the top bit back onto it. Otherwise, I don't turn mines. Now, the reason people turn them is to get oxygen back into the heap and to spread out the moisture a bit, because what you find is that you often have dry bits around the edges and then it's very moist in the center, and it will be warmer in the center as well. And you may also end up with like compaction or like just lumps of things that are just taking a really long time to break down. So that's why you would turn it. But you don't have to. Like, it is perfectly possible to just make compost without the hassle of turning it. And what I find is if I've got, piles of dry things on the edges, by the time I'm taking the heap to pieces, I'll just put them in the bottom of another bay and they can just form the basis of the next heap that gets made. Now, I also don't cover mine. I do often look at them and think maybe I should, but it's just one of those tasks that I just have not got around to doing. And again, I seem to be able to make compost perfectly fine without doing it. And the reasons why you would cover them is obviously to keep keep the moisture in, but stop excess moisture getting in. What you don't want is just a soggy, wet pile of material, because it's just not going to be the right conditions for it breaking down. You can keep the temperature a little bit higher if you have them covered, which also will speed up the breakdown. And you can also stop nutrients being just washed straight out of it. And also, if you have a lot of weed seeds blowing in, you can obviously stop them going in if you've got a cover on the top. But as I say, I don't really manage, don't cover mine, and don't seem to have a problem with it. And also, I don't think I've ever seen weeds growing out of it either. But if you do want to cover yours, and I know people who do, then Hessian is like one of the best materials you can use, or bits of old carpet, but they do need to be natural carpets. They're like a bit of wool carpet. Don't cover it with like 100% polyester. And in terms of how long it takes, well, like with everything with gardening and farming, it all depends on a whole load of different variables. And 6 to 12 months would be a good estimate. I would say 12 months probably, because for me, because I'm obviously not turning and not covering. So if you do these little tweaks, you can get compost faster than that. Now, hot composting is something that I don't know. So I don't know anything about it. I don't do it, and therefore I'm not even going to talk about it. And what you want to see in your compost heap, and what I absolutely love lifting up bits of compost and seeing this, is the red worms, the tiny, tiny little red worms. And they just kind of appear like magic because you don't find them anywhere else. Like, they make a beeline for the compost. And they are super cute. I love seeing those. And what you don't want to see is rats in it, obviously, because that is not very nice. Um, or anything else that decides to go and make a nest in it. It should smell nice. It should smell earthy and natural. It should not smell of rotting material, or as in rotting in a bad way. It shouldn't smell ammonia-y, or like it's all just turning into a horrible, stinky, black, monstery mess. It should smell very natural and very sort of rich. And you can use it depending on what you need it for, whenever you want, really. I mean, sometimes I've used mine before it's completely all broken down, and that could be because I don't mind having large chunks in it, or bits that haven't fully broken down. But if you're after that perfect finished compost, then you want to wait until it's quite dark brown in color and crumbly and just got this gorgeous texture. And if you know what normal compost feels like, that's the kind of thing that you're aiming for. You'll just know by looking at it. And there are different needs, that there's different types of compost and different needs that your plants will have. And this is why I love the Melcourt Silver Grow, because it's a wood-based product. You remember I said it's made of fine bark, wood fiber, and coir. And shrubs absolutely adore wood-based composts. So there's two different types of compost. There's the wood-based one, and then there's the non-wood-based one. So shrubs want something, if you're going to give them a compost, that is going to release its nutrients slowly for them. Because shrubs generally are not fast growing plants, even though they might be sold as, oh, vigorous and fast growing. They don't mean vigorous and fast growing in the way that annuals can be a seed 1 minute and then 6 foot tall a couple of months later. It's completely different. You can have fast growing shrubs, but what they mean is fast growing in the context of it being a shrub, if that makes sense. So shrubs don't want a huge blast of energy. Like, they don't want you to sort of put a can of Red Bull on them, which is the equivalent of what non-wood based composts are like. They're like real quick fixes for quick growth. And shrubs have, much thicker roots as well. So wood-based composts are absolutely perfect for them, because they don't collapse. Like, they will hold their structure. And so by not collapsing, they're not going to reduce the airflow around the roots. So there's this sort of thing about compost like settling and slumping when you put it into a planting hole. And there used to be this rule years ago that you would dig a hole and then you would put, masses of water in the bottom of the hole, and then you'd put a whole load of compost in the bottom of the hole, and then you would plant into it. And what people used to find is that A, you're just waterlogging the area where the roots go, but B, the compost would often, if it wasn't a wood-based one, it would compact down, and you find that your plant would actually drop down below the soil level, a week or so later, and you really don't want that situation. So the advantage of the wood-based composts, where they've got this bark and wood fiber inside them, is that they have a much better structure to them. Now, annuals and vegetables are the complete opposite. So they want to have access to their nutrients really quickly in order to get their short life cycle out of the way. And the rush of nitrogen that you get from the non-woody compost is absolutely perfect for them, because they've obviously got to make all this vegetative growth very, very quickly in order to finish their life cycle. And they like a less gappy textured compost so that their fine roots can access the nutrients. And also, just briefly going back to the shrubs issue, so they rely very much on that mycorrhizal fungi that's in the soil, because woodland areas are fungi dominated environments, and it's the fungi that's breaking down all the leaf mold and everything. And so if you think about how your shrubs, or how shrubs would behave in a more natural environment, they would have mycorrhizal fungi working around the roots of them. So that is what they prefer. So you really want to be thinking about matching the type of compost that you're making to the end goal of what you want to do with it. So if you've never started composting, or you're just a beginner, you know, you I don't want you to get bogged down with all of that, because it sounds a bit much. And to be honest with you, I just make one type of compost and it goes wherever I need it to. But then I put a bark mulch down around my shrubs in order to give them what they need. So I'm not actually making like a proper wood based compost. I just make one compost, but I wouldn't bother putting my compost around my shrubs, for example, because there is a more suitable product to put around the shrubs, if that all makes sense. So that is all I wanted to say about compost, to be honest. I mean, I could go on for more, but I think we might be labouring the point. It is always, I think, in my opinion, better to make your own compost. And the sooner you get started and work out what your technique is and what's the best way of you doing it, the better, because I think the prices of compost are never going to come down. And I think those products will never be as good as something that you can make yourself. Although, having said that, the Silver Grow could give you a run for your money. But there we are. That's what I think about compost. And it's just so much fun. Honestly, it's like magic. You just put all this stuff in a massive bin, and then a year later, you have like this dream product coming out the bottom. It's incredible. Okay, crashing on. Part 2, my plant profile series, which I have to say I'm really, really enjoying doing this. And I have picked a perennial this evening, having done annuals for the last 3 weeks. And this plant, Echinacea purpurea, also known as the coneflower, was one of my hero plants for 2025. And it reached number 3 on my most profitable chart. And that is actually after, I think, the hazel and the beech, which were just on the field and I didn't have to touch them. So that's how valuable Echinacea were for me last year. They're a North American native and they flower in the UK between July and October. And the best bit about them, or one of the best bits, is that they dry beautifully. So although I sold quite a lot of mine, I still had plenty left at the end of the year. So I dried them, pulled the petals off, hung them up to dry, and I have different lengthed ones, really nice and tall ones, some shorter ones, and I have used them in a couple of displays over winter, and they're just amazing. And we're at the end of January, and they're still looking amazing. They've just got these wonderful cones, which they're just so pretty. They're like, I don't know, they're like little mini tiny hedgehogs on sticks. I love them. And I think it's so useful to have a plant that has two different uses. Like not all flowers can be successfully dried, but the Echinacea just dry so nicely. And the second best bit about them is they've got really robust stems, which I happen to love. They give a really nice structure when you're putting them together. They hold nicely in the vase. They're just amazing. They really are. They're nice and tall, very tough and reliable. They are herbaceous perennials, which means they're going to completely disappear in the winter, which always gives me the heebie-jeebies, I have to say. I always think, oh my goodness, where have they gone? Have they died? Are they going to come back? And there's just sort of a mound of rotted black foliage on the floor. And then in the spring, they are back up, and they're super reliable and fully hardy in the UK, with also a long vase life. Now, I grow the classic one, the Echinacea purpurea, but I have got my eye on doing a white one this year because I think the white is very, very pretty. I got my plants in the spring of 2024. They were actually sown and grown by my neighbour, who is an absolute genius plant grower. And he grows lots of things from seed every year. And I bought them from him as full size plants and just literally planted them in the ground. And the thing I really loved and enjoyed about these plants, buying them already full size, was that you can get the spacing absolutely right. And if you're a regular listener, you'll know that I struggled a lot with spacing. Some things I've just made a bit of a mess of, and some things were just so far apart that it was a terrible waste of space. And then they all needed better support, and it was all a disaster. But the great thing about getting full size plants is that you can just tell by looking at them what the spacing is going to be like, and you know exactly what you're dealing with. A lot of the time, I've grown things I've never grown before, and a photo on a packet or a photo on the internet doesn't really give you a sense of what the plant is actually going to be like, and it can be a bit of a surprise a few months later when you end up with something that's either smaller than you thought or bigger than you thought, or does something a bit weird, or I haven't got the spacing right. Whereas getting them full size that someone else has grown, absolutely genius. And you also don't have to worry about anything eating them because they were big when I put them in the ground. So that whole buying from my neighbor thing took a whole load of stress away, because when you put your plugs in the ground, they're absolutely tiny and they're so vulnerable. And if you're putting perennial plugs in at this time of year, which I have been doing this week, which has just been a disaster really, because they're herbaceous ones, so they just disappear to absolutely nothing. So you put it in the ground, it's tiny, it's like the size of a 20 pence piece, and you turn around and you think, oh God, where did I put that? I can't even see it. So then you have to put like little markers in to mark where you've put them, and it's just quite stressful. Whereas Wumpfing great plants already, super relaxing, and you don't even have to label them because you just know already what they are, but you probably should label them. And the reason why this is such a great flower for florists is because it absolutely hits the nail on the head for naturalistic style flowers. But they look very considered, if you like. Like it's not that you've just got all these wildflowers together. They are a real statement flower, and the pink is, I think, very, very beautiful. And they've got these slightly they've got the petals which slightly bend backwards. It's technically known as reflexed, apparently, and they just bend backwards a little bit, and just, I don't know, they're just so pretty and last a long time once they're cut. And I already mentioned the stiff stems, which is also super helpful. And they're good for growers like us because they're a perennial that last for a few years, easily sown from seed, I'm assured. I haven't obviously done it yet. And they're tough. They are hardy in the UK. I haven't had any pest problem with mine whatsoever. Really nice long harvest window and multiple stems per plant, and doesn't need staking, or mine didn't need staking last year, which is not something I can say about all of my plants last year, but the Echinacea, nothing bad happened to them whatsoever. So if you're going to have a go at yourself, one thing I have learned about them is that they need a cold stratification period, which is where you either sow them in the autumn and they get naturally chilled outside, although obviously make sure nobody eats them, or you bung them in the fridge for a couple of weeks before you want to sow them. That doesn't always work. It's like they probably know that you've bunged them in the fridge rather than putting them outside, but that is apparently what you're supposed to do. And they do need light in order to germinate, so don't bury them if you're sowing them. I'm very tempted, although I have banned myself from buying any more seed because I have gone way over my limit. I might go and just grab a packet of the white ones and have a go at sowing them myself this year. Now, the rule for sowing perennials seems to be don't expect anything in the first year. Just let them get on with making vegetative growth and getting their root system established, and then they will go for it in year 2 and you can successfully cut from them. But well, would that be true? So I got mine, and no, that wasn't the case for me last year. I got mine in. They had been sown at the beginning of 2025, and they flowered quite incredibly the same year. So it's not always true. It is the plan that my perennial scabious are still thinking about things. They just about managed to put on a rosette of leaves last year, and they will hopefully be flowering this year, or they're going to get pulled up and composted. So, you know, there are all these rules, and then, you just kind of have to do it and see what happens, and don't count on them flowering in the first year, but don't be surprised if they do. Now, it is Friday. You know what I'm going to say. I'm going to wish you a wonderful weekend, and I'm going to tell you that I'll be back on Tuesday with the next episode as always. And I very much hope we have a dry weekend because I am so tired of all this rain. So irritating. So yes, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Do get in touch if you would like to have a question answered on a future episode. You can send me a DM on Instagram, and I always love hearing from you. So have a wonderful weekend and all the very best.